And we are live. Welcome, everybody. I'm here with Michael Lowenstein, doctor, and a bunch of other titles that he's going to share with us soon. He's an expert on employee engagement, advocacy, commitment, and beyond. We're going to cover all of these topics. But first of all, before we go into that, welcome, Michael.
Hello, nice to be here.
And welcome everybody. So we'd like to know if you're joining us live, where are you joining us from? So please use the chat. You should find it on the side next to the video and share with us where are you joining us from, what city, what country, what state. I am joining from Luxembourg, and we just talked with Michael, who is joining us from Pennsylvania. Is it right?
Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, mushroom capital of the world.
Amazing. So we are here today to talk about a number of topics and to kind of cover what we're going to go through. I put on the screen a journey and a number of terms that we're going to cover because Michael has spent, what is it, 22 years or over, Michael?
More than that. Yeah,
More than
roughly.
that, more than that, exploring the topics of employee satisfaction, employee engagement, employee commitment, advocacy, brand advocacy, and we're going to kind of untangle how they relate. So over to you, Michael. Tell us a little bit, what do you do and where do we start?
Well, I guess to summarize, my sort of profession and my passion is looking at the impact that having a people first culture, stakeholder centricity, and focus on providing value to stakeholders represents for any organization. That's it in a nutshell. And when organizations do it at an optimum level or paradigmatic level, the business outcomes are invariably really excellent. It's good for employees, good for customers, good for the public, good for shareholders, good for management and executives, good for everybody.
Awesome. And as I said, Michael is doing this for a long, long time. So I'm going to put on the screen a web link where you can find a bunch of his articles and other works. For those of you who are just listening to this episode, I'm going to read it out loud. So you can find Michael's work on customerthink.com /author/Michael _Lowenstein. So look for his stuff, and you can also find Michael on LinkedIn. He's got a strong following, and he posts awesome stuff. Last time he posted a
Just
video
about
from
every
the
day.
Office movie.
Yeah, just about every day.
That's right. That's right. And because we want to make this interactive, I'm going to kick off. We're gonna talk about a few of the topics first to warm us up. But I can see we have people joining us from various places. We have Arizona, Germany, Czech Republic represented in here. So welcome everybody. If you have questions, drop them in the comments on the side, and we're going to pick them up as we go. So that will be for the intro, and I'm going to dive right into it. So, Michael, you already told us what you're doing for your clients, for your customers. And when it comes to what I do, I usually focus on employee engagement, but you educated me basically explaining that this is not trendy enough anymore, and we should look beyond that. So, if we break it down a little bit, starting with the terms on the screen. So employee satisfaction versus employee engagement, coming to employee commitment, and all the way to advocacy. What does this journey represent, and how do we untangle these terms?
Satisfaction is pretty basic. I mean, it deals with compensation, it deals with workload, flexibility, teamwork, resource availability. It's basic. It's not necessarily connected
Mm-hmm.
to customer value, and very often it's pretty much compartmentalized. In other words, it's not enterprise wide very often, and so it tends to be pretty attitudinal, tends to be pretty tactical, and again, not directly connected to business outcomes. And so, about 20 years ago, a professor at Boston University came up with the idea, the general concept for employee engagement. The challenge with employee engagement is that it's basically about fit, alignment, and productivity. Employees are still looked at as costs. There was a study done by the Conference Board in 2006 where they looked at about 15 different employee studies, and they found that there were something on the order of 25 to 30 different drivers of behavior. So there was nothing that was very consistent. And again, the challenge was that it wasn't enterprise wide. Still looked at employees as costs rather than assets, and so it had limitations. Some of it was cognitive, some of it was emotional. Again, not very consistent. So what you're trying to do is to create, how do you measure? You want to measure what matters ultimately. And if your dual goals are to have committed employees who are really productive, really invested in the organization, you have to go further. You have to go further. You also need to find out from employees what they think customers are saying and why they're saying it. So this moves you on briefly to employee commitment. And employee commitment is pretty simple. What you're committed to the organization itself, that's clear. You're committed to your employer as an entity. You're also committed to its value proposition. What does it mean to customers and other employees? Finally, you're committed to customers themselves. Are you providing value to customers, right? You take it a step further. This is where enterprise-wide commitment begins to come in. And if you like, I'll talk about the example that we discussed the other day. One of my paradigms is a company that still exists in Canada and still exists in the UK. It's MBNA. MBNA America, before they were bought by Bank of America in 2006, was the second largest credit card issuer in the United States. Tremendous organization. As I mentioned to Alesh, I used to take clients to their office building, main office building in Wilmington, Delaware. Their KPIs were posted so that everybody could see them every day. Employees were incented if they met goals. One of the interesting things about the organization was that it was very people first. It was avowedly people first. And their mantra was, think of yourself as a customer. Post it everywhere in the building, in the rugs, in the desks, on your paycheck, everywhere. As I was mentioning to Alesh, one of the things that they used to do is if you were a vice president or above, you had to spend 5 hours every month. And this is before internet got really heavy and other forms of communication got heavy. So a lot of what was going on was by phone. But if you're a vice president, you had to be on the phone with customers calling in with questions or issues 5 hours every month. So part of the culture of the organization, the DNA, is that wherever you were, whatever your function, whoever you were, you were not really allowed to be very separated from customers. Now, if you like, I can give you a quick example of what they did. Their data collection, their database was better than anything really that I'd seen before that. If you were a credit card holder, let's say you were close to maxing out on your available credit. Let's say it was $15,000 and you were at $14,000 or so, and you wanted to buy a new couch for your house, and it was going to cost $2,000. Well, normally, if you try to get that from a regular credit card issuer, it might take you days. You might get it, you might not. At MBNA, you would contact their service center, and a rep who was empowered, enabled, and trained to do this. That rep didn't need approval from a supervisor or a manager or a vice president to grant you more credit. If your credit was good, you had a record of steady payment, and you were asking for just a little bit more money over your credit limit, you would get it. Not in 3 hours, not in 3 days. You could get it in 15 minutes. That's personalization. It's proaction. It's customer focus. It's it's absolutely relentlessly people first. It worked. So this is an organization of 25,000 employees. They didn't lose employees. They didn't lose customers. They had very low credit risk. So a very, very successful organization.
Actually, I love this example because it also shows how you can strengthen the employee commitment through providing autonomy to the people in the front line rather than just having them follow the book without having any
Yeah.
agency.
And there's also, to your point, there's a little bit of what's in it for me, WIIFM. It's good for the organization because we don't lose employees, which means we don't have to replace them. We don't have to have those costs. It's good for the customers because, that's a happy customer, not just a satisfied customer, a happy customer. That customer can be cross-sold, upsold, uh, you know, made aware of other services that they could take, etc. One of the paradigms that I look at that we discussed the other day is Richard Branson, Virgin companies, 400 different companies. They all operate the same way. They operate very much the way that MBNA does, a people first, stakeholder centric culture that works for everybody, works for the employees, works for the customers. That's where you get up to commitment. Advocacy is really where you've reached kind of the zenith, where you're not only committed to the organization, but you're social about it. So if we think in terms of business outcomes, what are you trying to achieve? You want to get to brand advocacy, and one of the ways that you get there is through customer advocacy. Another way that you get there is through employee advocacy. So when you have employees, let's say it's Harley Davidson. These are people who will wear Harley Davidson gear wherever they go. Not just customers, employees will do it too. Dealership personnel, Harley Davidson gear. That's a great example. Apple has that kind of following among employees and also among customers. So this is where advocacy comes in. It's not necessarily recommendation. Recommendation may be part of it, understood, but it's really this kind of behavior. It's, by the way, I think we talked about this the other day. It's deeply emotional, right? This is something that going back in time, we didn't really understand very well until Daniel Kahneman and behavioral economics and the Pecan rule. As an employee, what is it that you remember? What is it that's most impactful? Same thing. And the decision criteria for employees is not dissimilar from customers. A lot of emotional subtext for both groups. Yep.
I like that one. And just the peak and rule, I just recalled it the other day when I had an experience with customer support of in-house IT, and what made the difference for me is the specialist actually connected with me after the call. They used IM to just ping me and check a couple of hours later. Hey, is everything okay? Is it still working? Do you need anything else? And this was kind of over the moon for me because I never got this type of attention, and I still remember that.
It's extended behavior. There's a great story of a Southwest Airlines employee in Pittsburgh who got a request from an incoming passenger. She had medication that was in luggage that was delayed, and it was, it was probably fairly life-threatening. She needed to have that medication. That gate rep took it upon herself to check that luggage in when it came and take it, drive it to that passenger's house in suburban Pittsburgh. Who does that? The committed employee, an advocate for the organization, does that. And every time we see stories like that, you go back and say, well, where did that come from? Well, it came from the culture of the organization. The culture of the organization, it's embedded in the DNA to do those kinds of things. This is exactly what you experienced. A proactive, committed, invested employee who walked in your shoes and went the extra mile, right? Very important.
I mean, when you mentioned the company DNA, I know it sounds kind of sexy to call it that way, but it's not really fair, right? You're born with the DNA, but this is something you can actually build, you can create over time.
You may hear background. I got to stop you. You may hear background noise. As I told, I live in a community. They've come to mow the grass today. We've had rain for the past week, so they've come to mow the grass today. So you may hear a little background.
We can't hear any of that.
Oh, okay, good. Then I'll stop.
No, that's all good. So I was only saying that you mentioned the company DNA, and I was going to challenge it a little, saying like a DNA is something that's ingrained already. You're born with it, you can't change it, right? But with the company culture, you can foster it. You can build it up through good using good techniques, using leadership behaviors. So I was going to ask. We still have it on the screen. The path from satisfaction to engagement to commitment to advocacy. Would one of them be always precursor of the other? Would it be like Maslow pyramid that you need to have employees satisfied to have them engaged, to have them committed, or
It's
are
not,
those kind of
it's
independent?
not necessarily a pyramid like that.
Uh-huh.
There are companies, MBNA is a great example, Alesh. This is a company that never really focused on employee satisfaction, never really focused on employee engagement, always focused from the beginning on employee commitment and ultimately employee advocacy. A lot of it depends on the leadership of the organization and where they want to take the company. So you can have organizations in the United States. We have Wegmans, we have Costco, Baptist Healthcare. There are organizations that either do it from the beginning or they evolve to it. And a lot of times that's going to be through corporate leadership, servant leadership. What am I in service of? Well, I'm in service of provision of value to stakeholders. And that's principally, yes, the financial community and stakeholders, shareholders, but it's employees and customers principally. I mean, it's also suppliers. So it's kind of all of the above. And an organization that either has it from the beginning or evolves to get there. And in Baptist Healthcare's case, they went through kind of a 2-year odyssey point, and they are easily the most preeminent healthcare organization in North America today because of it. They do it right. Employees are committed. They're advocates for the organization. Patients and patients' families are the focus of providing value. They're training a lot of other healthcare organizations really around the country. So there are great examples of companies that do it. Southwest Airlines, Herb Kelleher, when that company was founded, that's what they believed in. Herb Kelleher, while he was alive, that's exactly what their focus was, all day, every day. They've had
So what does
issues
that mean in
recently.
terms of action? So what do they do if you want to get there in 2 years' time? Where do you start?
Well, you start with what's your orientation. In the case of Southwest Airlines, they're very selective in terms of the people that they bring in. So it's something on the order of 2% of the people that they interview actually get brought in. Once they're in, they're cross-trained. Something on the order of 80% of Southwest Airlines employees are cross-trained every year. So you might be an executive one day and handling baggage the next day. You might be a gate agent one day and work in some kind of a managerial capacity in the home office the next. Cross-pollination. They want everybody to understand what it takes to provide value. And it's imbued within the culture. Tony Hsieh, who is the late CEO of Zappos, once said that brand is just a lagging indicator of the culture. If the culture is strong, you can create a strong brand. If the culture is kind of meandering and inconsistent and tactical, and again, going from point to point without any kind of strategic plan, pardon me, it's harder to get to that. Companies that are successful, Zappos is a great example. Southwest Airlines, by and large, is a great example. Certainly, this mantra is followed by all of the Virgin companies. And you can look at really successful companies around the world, and this is kind of at the core. So the culture is there. Culture, the way that we understand it, and actually Kahneman defined this, it's a collection of stories that employees tell about the organization. That's the point I think that you were making. This is, when employees understand what the company is all about, they can repeat it. They can repeat it, and it has meaning. There's purpose there. There's it's process, it's data, but it's really built around purpose. One of the companies that you might know is Subaru. Subaru is close by here in Camden, New Jersey. They are very focused on people. They are very focused on altruism inside the organization, through the dealership network, and outside as well. World-renowned company that's very focused on doing good for employees, for owners, for the dealers, and for the community at large. There's a lot to be said for that. A lot to be said for that.
Perfect. I mean, I have a bunch of other questions, and we're gonna go through them. But I want to give an opportunity to the people who are watching us, because I know that we have people managers in the audience. Some of them, senior. We have people in various functions in here, and they might be thinking what I'm thinking. It's like, oh my God, I've been focusing on employee engagement. Am I obsolete now? Am I doing it wrong? Because Michael, as you know, what I do is like employee engagement activities, events for employees, workshops, stuff like that. And I will basically say me, hey, you are focusing on the wrong thing. You should focus on employee advocacy. So would you say that the HR professionals, let's say employee relations professionals, they are actually chasing the wrong metrics now, when they should
Well,
change?
it's a great question, because they're starting to get more sophisticated. If they still look at employees as costs rather than essential company assets, contributory assets, and are only focused on employees' ability to fit, be aligned, and be productive, that's not necessarily going to create customer value or value for the employee, for that matter. We've seen situations where companies are trying to take fairly tactical measures around employee engagement, and maybe they've been having a fair amount of employee turnover, and hoping that some of these things, like just increased pay, are going to stem the tide. Well, it may help, but it's not a permanent solution. Employees largely want purpose. They want to be able to contribute. They want to be able to see the value that they produce for themselves and also for constituents. And if an organization is doing sort of basic kinds of things and treating employees, I hate to say it, but more like chess pieces, right, really, than assets, then they're going to continue to experience turnover. A lot of what happens with regard to experience anyway doesn't, there are a lot of studies, even SHRM has had studies like this. They're not company wide. So let's say a company is focused on customer centricity or customer focused or customer obsession. They may do so. They may do so a bit, and they may do so in certain sections of the company. But again, it's not enterprise wide, and employees not involved can get marginalized because they're not participating in these programs. So HR professionals are getting more proficient at this because the landscape, again, continually moving. Heraclitus used to say, the philosopher used to say, all is flux. There is nothing permanent except change. So what we've seen with employees and customers, particularly in the past 15, 20 years, and it's kind of been exacerbated by the COVID epidemic, they become more skeptical. They become more concerned, more focused on on what's best for them. And they want companies to understand that and help them attain those goals. So if you're skeptical, if you don't trust, right? We talked about trust as a core emotional component of behavior. If I can't trust the organization as an employee, if I can't trust the organization as a customer, it's really hard to build a strong brand. It's hard to keep employees. It's a challenge to keep customers. They can become less interested, less invested. They can become at risk. That's a concern for organizations. So there is a bit of strategy that needs to take place here, certainly.
You mentioned the changes due to COVID, but There are two things I wanna pick up. So let's see if we have any questions from the audience. Of course, as I said, if you have questions for Michael, please drop them in the comments. We're gonna pick them up right away. But two topics I see related to this. Like there are tons of articles about this generational shift. Generation Z and whatever. People wanting work-life balance, not really wanting to buy into this transactional mentality of being part of the company. And I wonder if you believe this changes things, or if that's just a different type of challenge that we've been facing.
Well, goes back to your question about HR. They have to recognize that the workforce is changing.
Mm-hmm.
That Gen Z, millennials, and even Gen X, they have kind of different values than older employees, particularly Gen Z. I did a webinar last year on YOLO. You only live once. Um, Employees are looking for purpose. They're looking for involvement. They're looking for, again, a personal reward. Some of it's financial, but some of it, is am I creating value? Do I have a purpose within this organization? Does the organization have a purpose? Some of it is social. Some of it is very personal. Um, so, yeah, HR has become a lot more attuned to the different age groups and what they want. Again, and I have a lot of material on this, won't go into it now, but yeah, there are differences by age. Frankly, there are differences by gender, and
Really?
you know,
Okay.
women have different job needs, particularly younger women and younger married women, particularly with children. It's very different than young men or older men. Again, HR has to be very, very concerned about this, and you see pilot programs and even company-wide programs where this has come more to the fore. Yeah.
I just drill down because I know it's a sidestep a bit, but you mentioned the gender differences. What does that mean for companies who are trying to implement, diversity and inclusion policies, who are trying to cater to their employees with equal approach, equal opportunities? How can they use this data, being respectful to this aspiration for equity, while catering for the needs?
Yeah, I've had this with specific clients, things that we have learned. Um, one of them was a major discount retailer, where we learned that women were very concerned about companies' truthfulness in these sorts of things, their ability to not just identify programs for DEI and belonging, but then to carry them out, not just carry them out, but make sure that they were sustained and make sure that they were getting feedback. It's not enough just to put these things in place. You need to get the feedback from employees to continually improve, to continually see that you are delivering the value that these employees want. So it's an ongoing process. Again, they're learning. I think HR is doing a lot more outreach now. The ones that are a bit more focused and a bit more evolved are doing this. HR has a very pivotal role. You know, um, One of the things that they can't really be doing is the same things they've been doing and expecting a different result. The generations, the new folks coming in are going to hold them to higher standards. They're going to be more, as I said, more skeptical. They're going to be more emotionally driven than employees had been in the past. That's going to make a lot of their decisions. It's interesting that the emotions that you and I might have as customers, employees have similar emotions, and they get expressed in different ways. When you've got advocates at the top, you got people who are very positive, social about it, and willing to bring others along with them. That's why it's even better than commitment. Commitment is strong, advocacy is better.
Okay, so advocacy would be like, Apple fans saying, "Hey, buy iPod, or I have it," and it's
Sure.
I think for me, that's the ultimate, getting stickers with the brand and just putting it on your personal stuff.
Sure, absolutely. Well, they know it. Again, um, I'll go back to Tony Hsieh's comment that brand is a lagging indicator of the culture. So if employees feel it, they will represent it inside the organization and outside of the organization. Here's a challenge. A lot of the employee research doesn't get at this. A lot of the employee research is still focused on satisfaction and engagement. Nothing wrong with it, but where is the information that you need to have on the provision of customer value? Studies that I design, probably half the questions have to deal with my ability as an employee to act on my own to provide customer value. Am I supported in that? Am I trained in that? Am I enabled in it? Et cetera. And I want to know. The other thing that I want to see from employees is when customer studies are done, ask employees what they think. This is voice of the employee. What do the employees think relative to what the customers think? Something we call mirroring. I really want to know that, and it's very critical. And in all candor, absent, sometimes totally missing from employee studies. Employees have very specific views on value that they're providing to each other and value that they're providing to customers, and it's often left on the table.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned this one because for the events I'm running, workshop, webinars, conferences, I do try to measure sentiments. I'm using feedback surveys right after the fact. But in one of your texts, you are actually referring to the emotional reactions, emotional responses, and
Sure.
just the fact I'm gonna paraphrase what you're saying there. It's like just the reason that they might be saying, the respondents might be saying one thing, but they might be feeling something else. So how do you get to what they feel? How do you get there when they are not going to tell you when you ask them?
It's a
Or
great
how do you
question.
ask so they tell you?
Well, there's a famous saying, David Ogilvy, who is, the noted advertising icon, the genius. He said three things. He said, people don't think what they feel. They don't say what they think, and they don't do what they say. That's a challenge for those of us who do customer and employee research. To your exact point, we have to find ways of peeling back the layers of the onion, right? So that we can identify those things that are really going on. Here we go again. It's behavioral economics. What's driving the behavior? And what you're trying to get at are, all right, look at those things that have occurred either in a tactical service issue or a long-term engagement, a long-term relationship that I as an employer, I as a customer have with the company. I need to be able to use research and, as you're saying, doing sentiment analysis to find out what's really going on so that I can begin to create programs to get at these things, maybe on a pilot basis, to improve the situation going forward. So, I always take David Ogilvy's words as being very wise and very instructive. It's a challenge to those of us who are doing customer experience, employee experience, brand experience research to be smarter and find better ways to get at the insights that really make a difference as far as decision making. Yeah.
So is there any secret, anything when it comes to peeling that onion beyond what you're already using? Like, let's say, focus groups, qualitative research, deep interviews. What else maybe can we do that we're not doing normally?
Well, this I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but one of the things that I've been doing for a while, this goes back to a colleague of mine who really kind of set this up, is doing structured equation modeling, doing very specific kinds of modeling to get at the truth. What's really driving behavior? Again, not just what they say, not just what they're giving you as straight answers, but looking at, and then looking at emotional context related to all of that. When you have that, there's an old thing, and there's an old adage in total quality, Koro Ishikawa, call it the 5 why. You have to go to the 5th level if you can to find out what's really going on, because people won't directly tell you. This is why survey research can take you too far afield of the reality that you're seeking. Um, if you're doing the modeling and using the correct multivariate techniques, again, principally things like structured equation modeling, one of the techniques that I use, here we go, I'll just throw it out. Discriminant function analysis. Discriminant function analysis, long story short, is swing voter. In any voting district, you have people who are one party or another, and depending upon how they feel, they can go one way or the other. What you're trying to find out is what particular factors of value delivery will make them more positive, lean more positive, and consistently stay more positive. And the same thing is true on the negative side. It's a multivariate technique. Simple way to express it is it's a way to look at swing voter. What are those things of the value elements that you're delivering that'll make customers more positive or more negative? It's pretty darn reliable. I've been using it for years. It's not me who created it. I was fortunate enough over the years to work with great marketing scientists who really look for reliable, simplified ways of getting at insights. So it isn't Michael Lowenstein saying it. It's the marketing scientists who've given me the guidance to do it. And we found that it works for a whole range of B2B and B2C clients. It's a great question that you ask, and it's one that marketing researchers, CX researchers, BX researchers, EX researchers have been struggling with for quite a while.
Thank you. I'm going to pretend I understood the depth of your answer. I understood the surface of it. So when you mentioned I'm going to look up most of that after we're done here.
Okay.
You mentioned the swing voter, and I'm thinking even in today's society with social and media and people kind of sharing their preferences more widely, I guess still a swing voter might be fairly isolated and it might not create a snowball effect. Well, if you have a passive or actively disengaged employee, the water cooler talks basically contaminate the company, right? Over time.
Yeah. There was a great book called Bowling Alone some years ago. It's been updated. Robert Putnam, who was a sociologist at Harvard. And what he found is that over the last number of years, things like water coolers, people who are participating in civic groups has declined dramatically. People are a lot more isolated, which is why you've seen this rise in social media. I have grandkids. You sit around a dinner table with grandkids, and all they're doing is holding this up and say, "Oh, yeah, that's what I'm looking at. I'm not talking to you." And I'm not even talking to my brother or my sister. I'm certainly not talking to you. I'm looking at this. So.
Right. I wasn't listening. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So it can be very isolating, and Putnam recognized it. And the challenge that marketers have really in creating brand impression and brand strength is how do we use content? What kind of content and what kinds of people can we use who are going to help us break through? So there's a lot of clutter, there's a lot of material, and there's a lot of isolation at the same time. So this is why a lot of marketing has evolved, and it's straight up advertising isn't used as much as it was, and a lot more of this social kind of promotion and people who are creating these tremendous reservoirs of followers are getting so much attention from marketers, because that's the only way to get to Gen Z and to millennials and to a degree Gen X. That's the only way, but it's a more active way today. Again, people are a lot more isolated. I'm sure you see it in Luxembourg. We see it here in the States. Just walk down any street and find the number of people who all they're doing is staring at the screen. That's what they do. I have it in my own family. So
I'm afraid you're right.
I can relate.
Well, Michael, before we kind of wind down, I wanted to hear some good example, cautionary tale, and we spoke earlier about two, in my opinion, comparable companies. We spoke about Walmart and Costco, and you mentioned their attrition. What would you say that one of them is doing better than the other?
Yeah, it's a great question. Costco is an interesting company. I mean, and so is Walmart. I mean, both big major discount retailers. The operating models are a little bit different, but what's dramatically different between them is the approach to employees. Now, I'm not speaking necessarily negatively about Walmart, but they tend to be pretty traditional. So they're focused on employee satisfaction and employee engagement. They are losing about 60% of their employees a year, rough numbers. That's not all that unusual for, I don't want to be too pejorative here, but say non-evolved retailers. Costco is very different. Costco has a very purpose-driven organization. They're very people-centric, right? Stakeholder-centric. And the employees are very committed to the organization. They're proactive. They don't leave. Yeah, they're compensated a little bit higher, which doesn't hurt, But it's the culture of the organization that looks beyond employee fit, employee alignment, and employee productivity. Certainly at Costco, those things are expected, certainly, but employees represent more. I've had the opportunity over the past couple of years to interview a range of employees at both organizations. And I can see the reasons pretty clearly for the numbers that I just quoted. Walmart, they're just kind of, the word that I would use, a nice academic word, is phlegmatic. They move slowly. They're changing, but it's evolving very slowly. Costco is one of these organizations, kind of like Southwest, that has a strong culture, on the order of what you see with the Virgin companies, right? And what we had seen with MBNA, which still, as I say, operates the same way in Canada and the UK. So organizations that have it embedded in the culture, that do great training and stick by it, and really understand that employees are absolute essential assets of the organization, rather than just kind of stick figures and chess pieces to move around. That accounts for the difference. I'm sure, and I actually read sort of late last year an interview with the head of HR at Walmart. And it was interesting what she had to say, but I kept getting this feeling of, it was kind of a deja vu feeling that, yeah, you're kind of changing and moving, but not at the speed that you should be. I mean, if I'm just looking at it as an outsider, they understand it. I think they're starting to make change, but pretty slow.
So if I pressed you for an advice, if you say to this HR executive, hey, here's one thing I wanted to change. Maybe Costco is doing that to move faster. She was on board. What would it be?
Take a group, make it a pilot, right? Change the whole orientation of the group. Mm-hmm. Treat them directly as assets. Build a small culture around them to start. You asked me at one point, what can a company begin to do this week? That's one of the things they can begin to do this week. They can also start to ask employees, just as an adjunct to this, what are you delivering in terms of customer value? How is your job devoted to customer value? I think we spoke before. I said, there's a quote that I like from W. Edwards Deming, the leader of the total quality movement in the United States. He said that every employee, every company has, let me say this right. There are two kinds of employees in every company: the employee who provides value to the customer, and the employee who provides value to someone who does. There are no other jobs. So a company can set up a quick pilot where the training, the enablement, the empowerment is all built around that. Learn from it and then begin to cascade it out. Any organization can do that. Any organization can do that. What does it require? It requires the discipline, the will, the desire, and the investment of resources to do it. And they will see the results. Again, there are companies that have come to it, and there are companies learning to do it, and then there are companies that'll never get there. So, that's, if I were sitting next to somebody, if I were sitting with the HR head at Walmart, I would say, this is one of the things you can do, and you can do it tomorrow. You literally can do it tomorrow. So that's my advice.
Thank you, Michael. I think this is a fitting end for our talk in here. So what I want to do one more time, I want to put on screen where you can find Michael's materials is customerthing.com, and under authors you can find Michael Lowenstein. And there's also a lot of content that Michael is providing through LinkedIn. Any other place you would like to highlight, Michael?
Well, I think, with LinkedIn, I try to provide material just about every day, and I'm looking at trends and major things that are happening in brand, brand experience, employee experience, and customer experience, stakeholder centricity, organizational purpose, etc. Those are the things that I try to put up every day. Hopefully, they're helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, I believe they are, and I'm going to read much more into the deep analysis on emotional response. And what I do, if anyone's interested, I was focusing on engaging events, workshops, conferences. But after learning from Michael, I might need to change the vocabulary around it a little bit more.
Go
so
for
it's
commitment.
more hip. So that's that. You can find me on LinkedIn, and if you're interested in topics and meeting really educated, specialized expert guests as Dr. Michael Lowenstein, I do this every Thursday. So join us again. Michael, thank you so much again for joining us, and thank
Thank
everybody.
you. It was wonderful. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you.